quadratic equations. Our learning target for today is I am learning to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Our very first little bit of vocabulary, we'll look at the zero of a function. Zero of a function has actually a lot of names, is our solutions. So some things will ask you to find the solution to a quadratic equation. Some things will ask you to find a zero to a quadratic equation. And sometimes they'll call them roots. So, or they can be called roots. So solutions or roots to quadratic equations. There we go. In which we find the X intercepts. And if you think about the x-axis again, if we're looking for the X intercepts, we're looking for every time where y is 0. Now, as far as that goes, there's actually a lot of words here that are really key, and I know like you probably have seen these words before, you didn't really know what they probably meant, but underline 0, solutions, roots, and X intercepts. All those 4 words mean the exact same thing when it comes to a quadratic equation. So some instructions may tell you, hey, find the solutions to the quadratic equation. Some instructions may say, find the roots to the quadratic equation. Some steps may say to find the zeros of the quadratic equation. So all 4 of those words right there mean exactly the same thing. Now we have 3 different types of solutions, and just sketch out for me 3 coordinate planes. You don't need any tick marks or anything, but just make an x-axis and a y-axis for 3 different graphs. So x-axis, y-axis, x-axis, y-axis, x-axis, y-axis. So our first type of solution will be for 2 solutions, in which we have the quadratic equation look like that right there. Because we said that it's the X intercepts. So that quadratic graph here, that U-shaped parabola, it's called a parabola made by a quadratic equation, crosses our x-axis twice. So it has 2 solutions. Now as far as it goes, you would state those 2 just x points. So like this one would be like at -4, 4, and the other one would be out here at 2. You wouldn't worry about the zeros or writing the order pair because it would be like -4, 0 and 2, 0. So it does have 2 solutions because it crosses our x-axis twice.
We got the other one is great recovery.
Yeah. Like I said, that's probably the most common type of solution we see for our quadratics. The next one is if we have a 1 solution. So 1 solution for our quadratic graph, our parabola, is like if it were to touch the x-axis just at its lowest or highest point. Well, now that's not a beautiful graph. Let's try that again. So I just put a point there at 3, and my parabola goes up. So the solution would just be right there at 3. It only has 1 solution, it only touches it 1 time. And do y'all want to take a stab at what the last one's going to be?
No solution.
You got it, no solution. And so no solution can occur. It's like your circle with a line through it for your answer, and it's where the parabola doesn't cross the x-axis at all. So everything goes back to that x-axis and how many times it can pass it. Now this is important because when we solve it by factoring, we can still end up with 3 different types of solutions. We can end up with 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solution. So kind of knowing that there's different types out there helps us out. So our next vocabulary word here is zero product property. The zero product property. Zero product property means we're going to focus on 2 things. Zero, and what does the word product tell us to do? multiply. So if we're multiplying by 0, well, what's anything times 0? 0. So anything times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. Now, we can apply that to setting things equal to 0 too. So for example, if I have A times B equals 0, then what does that mean that A could possibly be? So A could possibly be equal to 0. Or what else? Yeah, it could be any other number. So A could be equal to 0. But what else over here could also be equal to 0 to make it equal 0? B. So you could also have B could also equal 0. So as far as that goes, we can set each piece here that's equal to 0 being equal to 0 itself, because it could be the 0 part of that multiplication. And you're right, it could be any other number too, but we're all good with that one. So anything times 0 is 0. So if A times B equals 0, then A is equal to 0, and B is also equal to 0. The last little bit we're going to look at is just types of factoring. If you want to write out just types of factoring, don't worry about writing out the 4 quadratics. We'll talk about that here in just a second. That way we can see we've learned 5 different types of factoring, but 4 quadratics, we only have to remember 3 of them. One of the most standard forms that we see a quadratic equation in is always like if we have y equals x squared. So all the exponents just have to be squares. So think about, what is our very first type of factoring for no matter what the exponents are? What is step 1? GCF, you got. So we'll have types of factoring that are just GCF. Alright, what else deals with a square? You're close. What does the C in dot stand for? Cube. So what would be the other one it could be? Cube. So that's the exponent of 3 we were talking about. So we can only have exponent of 2. So what would be the other ones that have exponents of 2? Okay, so you're close. It's what of squares? Difference of squares. You got. So we have DOS. There's one last type of factoring we have that has a square starting it off. Trinomials, you got it. And all the quadratics, the standard form of a quadratic is actually a trinomial. So like standard form, oh, not what I wanted to do, I wanted to green. So standard form for a quadratic equation is going to be our ax squared plus bx plus c, but there's one extra part to it. What does it have to equal today? 0. You got it. So that's your standard form for a quadratic equation, is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the majority of the ones we will see today will be trinomials, but remember, we still first got to check for GCF, and be aware that we can end up with DOS problems too. Alrighty, so example 1. We're asked to solve this by factoring. We have x squared minus 10x plus 16 equals 0. So we're all good. It's equal to 0, which we said is that 0 product property, that we got to be equal to 0, so we're all set there. Alright. So now, what's the first step for factoring? Check for GCF. Do I have one here? No. What gives away is we start off with just x squared here, and no number in front of it, and he doesn't have an x, so no GCF. So then, how many terms we got? Well, we just look at just this side. 1, 2, 3. You got it. So since I have my 3 terms, that means it's going to be what type of factor? Trinomials. We got our ax squared plus bx plus c. And the odds are equal to 0, so we're all set there. So now, what's my factors of a? Or sorry, what is a?
1.
1. You got it, 1. And what is c?
16.
16. And it's a positive 16. And later on we're going to have to add to a negative b. So I have to keep that in mind here in a second. So what's our factors of 1?
Just 1.
1 times 1. Alright, what's our factor of 16? 1.
Times 16. 2 times 8. 4 times 4.
You got it, and that's it. Now, 2 positives can multiply to a positive, or what else can do it? 2 negatives. So I'm going to make everybody here negative 4 times negative 4, negative 2 times negative 8, negative 1 times negative 16. And how many parentheses do we get for a trinomial? 2. So, and it's still equal to 0, so never forget to put that equal 0. Drop it down. Always kind of hurts my heart a little bit when we lose it, because this is an officially quadratic equation, and equations must have those equal signs. Now my factors of a come first, so what's my factors of 1x squared? You got 1x and 1x. So 1x and 1x. Alrighty. Now we have to then pick factors over here that can add to our negative 10x. You got it. So let's just start there with the negative 2 and a negative 8. So negative 2, negative 8. You still do have to do the checks. So you got to make sure it still goes correctly. So 1x times negative 8 will be a negative 8x. Negative 2 times 1x is a negative 2x. Negative 2x plus a negative 8x gives us a negative 10x, which is what we're looking for, so it checks. So if we were factoring, we would stop here and say, oh, we're done. But we're not. We're asked to solve this equation by factoring. So we factored it, check. But now, go back to your zero product property. We said any piece that's being multiplied that's equal to 0 can be set equal to 0 by itself. So we're going to take this first parenthesis, 1x minus 2, and set it equal to 0. So I just go write x minus 2 equals 0, because do I need to show that 1 anymore? No, that's implied. Same way, we're going to do the same thing to our 1x minus 8. So x minus 8, and set it equal to 0 too. And now just solve each equation. So take my minus 2 over there, and here becomes a what? Positive 2. You can write 0 plus 2 if you want to. What is 0 plus 2 just going to give you? 2. So you can just go ahead and write out that answer, because then all the times you all can go ahead and see it. Same way here. If this is a minus 8, and I bring him over here, he's going to become a what? You got it, plus 8. So 0 plus 8 is just going to be just 8. And this trinomial has 2 solutions. I'm sorry, this quadratic equation that was a trinomial has 2 solutions. Our 2 solutions are 2 and 8. Because that means if you substitute either of those values in here, you end up with 0 whenever you go back and substitute it in. So our example 2 here will be our 2x squared equals a negative 4x plus 6. Now this one has a first new step that we're going to have to make.
Flip it.
We're going to have to make a note about. Right now it's 2x squared equals a negative 4x plus 6.
It's got to be on the same side.
You got it. Everything has to be on the same side, so I have to set it equal to what first? 0. So must set equal to 0 first. That's the very first thing we have to do before we can even worry about solving it or factoring or doing anything. So if I already have a 2x squared over here, who needs to be on this side of my 2x squared? 4x. Now remember, like that trinomial, your ax squared plus bx plus c, that's the form we want it in. So as far as it goes, if that's a minus 4x, it's going to come over here to become a positive 4x, and my plus 6 will then come over here and become a minus 6. You got it, equals 0. Now we're set. So we now have that equation set equal to 0. So now that it's all set equal to 0, we factor it. So what's our very first step of factoring? GCF, does it have one? Yes. I love this one because it does have a GCF, and we have 2, 4, 6, so it's going to all even numbers. 2. So here's going to have a GCF of 2. Do I have any variables in common?
No.
No. So divide it right here by 2. So what's 2x squared divided by 2?
1x.
You got 1x squared. All right, 4x divided by 2.
2x.
2x, very good, and negative 6 divided by 2.
And 3.
Negative 3 equals 0. And now that we've taken out that GCF of 2, next step is to make sure inside that parentheses it looks like our trinomial ax squared plus bx plus c. And we're good. Is even is equal to 0, so we're all set. So what's our a value? A is
1x.
1. You got it. And c is
3.
negative 3. Yep, you grab that sign in front. The factors of 1 would be 1 times 1. Factors of 3 would be 1 times negative 3. And we're good. So one thing we cannot forget to do with our GCF is drop him down. So 2 drops down. Then we make our 2 parentheses for our answer. And this time, remember, I have to make sure it equals to 0. Always equal to 0 there at the end. Factors of our ax squared would be 1x and 1x. And lucky for us, 3 is also prime. So what's the factors of 3 we should try? The only one that's there, so positive 1 minus 3. We got to check it now. So what is 1x times negative 3? Negative 3x. And then 1 times 1 is going to be 1x. But if I add those together, I'm going to get negative 2. So what do we need to do?
Switch the negative 3 to a negative 1.
You got it. Switch the minus and the plus. So I'm going to make that a minus 1 and a plus 3. So now 1x times 3 will be a positive 3x. Negative 1 times 1x will be a negative 1. Negative 1x plus a positive 3x is a positive 2x. That's what we wanted there, so we check. So up until this point, we're still just factoring. We first found our GCF, we factored our trinomial. This is where we hit our new stuff now. I'm going to take each and every part that's being multiplied and set it equal to 0. So here's my tricky question. What's the first part being multiplied? The 2, you got it, because the 2's there in front, so I have to say 2 equals 0. Then my 1x minus 1 equals 0. And then my 1x plus 3 equals 0. And then we just solve each equation. So if I come back to my first one here, does 2 equal 0? Is that true? No. Do I have any variables? No. So that one's gone. I don't even have it no more. 2 does not equal 0. That doesn't work. Now what I do with my minus 1? You got it. Transpose him, and he becomes a positive 1, so x equals 1. And now my plus 3 is going to become a...
flip it to a negative 3.
You got negative 3, and we're all done. And that finishes up that one. So just remember, it's still an equation. You can still check your answers by plugging it back in. This example here, we have our 2x squared plus x equals 15. Alrighty, so first things first, what do we say was special about quadratics that we need to make sure we get?
Equals 0.
Make it equal to 0. So make sure you realize it must equal 0 from the main beginning. So currently I have 2x plus x here on the left. Who needs to come to the left? 15. So minus 15 becomes a minus 15. You got so 2x squared plus x minus 15 now is going to equal 0. So step 1, check. We got the whole thing to equal 0. Alright, now we need to see if it has a GCF. That's always step 1. Does it have a GCF? No. What's the easiest way to look at it until it doesn't? You got, he doesn't have a coefficient and he doesn't have a variable. So now, how many terms we got? 3. So is that our trinomial ax squared plus bx plus c? And we got it, and it still equals 0 because everything today equals 0. And now we're back to finding factors of a is 2 and finding our factors of c, negative 15. So our factors of 2 are going to be what? You got it, 1 and 2. Factors of a negative 15. You got it. Perfect. Got our factors of our a and our c. Now we write our answer. So there we go. We have our 2 parentheses equals 0 again. So never forget that it always equals 0. Now, what's our factors of our a? You got it. So it'll be a 1x and a 2x. Because 1x times 2x is 2x squared. Alright, now what factors of C do we know how to start with? Alright, so positive 3, negative 5. Positive 3, negative 5. And now we got to check it, make sure we pick the right one. So 1x times negative 5 is a negative 5x. 3 times 2x is 6x. What's 6x plus a negative 5x? 1x, that was perfect. We had the signs and everything right the first time. That's what we needed, so we check. And now for our last step, I'm going to take each piece of the parenthesis and have it set equal to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0. And this one is 2x this time, so 2x minus 5 equals 0. So transpose my plus 3 has become minus 3. So it's just be x equals negative 3. And over here, same bit. Take my minus 5, make them positive 5. We get 2x equals positive 5. This one actually has an extra step now. What's my last step going to be?
Divide by 2.
Divide both sides by 2. You got it. Divide both sides by 2. 2's cancel. X equals 5 over 2. That doesn't reduce. All the answers will be written in fraction form, so I know it's tempting to write 2.5 because that's what your calculator gives you, but try to leave them as fractions. If you want to, use Desmos to do that. But that kind of finishes up for our notes. If you notice, all of it's just factoring until you hit this green step here where you set each piece equal to 0, and you go on from there.